deprived athletes of a right that every other American citizen has. And so what's at stake in this conversation is incredibly significant, and it's really important to every single person, whether they're involved in the college sports system or not.
What I find interesting that you all were discussing is this exploitative system, really thinking about the NCAA's role and setting the stage for how we understand name, image, and likeness, and the harm that is being caused by our male, female, and other gendered student athletes. You know, when we think about addressing these issues, where do we start, particularly thinking about the issues that impact Black people in sport?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, being a grassroots director, I think we start in the grassroots. I think it's important that we educate the parents at a younger age when their kids are in middle school, and have them understand how important it is to be compensated, understand how important their name is, how important their likeness is. Things have changed a lot, and I think the time has moved. Social media has moved on faster than we have. So at the moment, these younger athletes, they know how to market themselves, and they know how to be compensated from their name, image, and likeness. They create their own image. They create that on their own. So now the NCAA has to figure out how to catch up with social media, how to catch up with the younger generation. And they found ways to not catch up. They've stalled, and they've done so many things to not bring this to the forefront. But I think we have a group that's going to continue to push and put this in the forefront till some changes are made.
And Tamika, to your question, and Terrell, you know, I think you've said it so beautifully in terms of how times are changing and how that sensibility about what it is that we're dealing with right now is so critical to our understanding of what this issue is all about. Because the NCAA, by any measure, fights athletes in terms of their efforts to gain access to their rights, you know, mightily. While the NCAA tournament was really kicking off for the men on Thursday and Friday nights of last week, the NCAA was filing their response to the case that we're talking about right here with the Supreme Court. And, you know, if you wrap your mind around that for a minute, the athletes who are competing in the arena right now, who are generating revenue, are actually, and opposing their treatment by the NCAA, their efforts are actually paying for the NCAA to oppose them at the highest level in the land. And that by itself is something which really should give us all pause. And I think it really demonstrates to us kind of that we really need to understand who it is that we're dealing with. And who we're dealing with is the NCAA and the conferences. And athletes are not members of the NCAA. And this is important to understand. We can ask the question, well, why are we here? And the reason why we're here talking about this is the fact that we don't have a fair system. We've got an exploitative system. And the only way that athletes can retrieve any kind of fairness is to sue the very entities that constantly say that they have the interests of athletes at heart when they don't. So I think as a basic understanding, we begin with that and then we take action.
I really appreciate how you both have talked about that this is very action oriented. So the NCAA clearly has been taking legal action. They've been taking policy action against our student athletes, not being able to bring them to the table in an equitable manner. And you've also talked about how the student athletes are now having this opportunity to rally and use their own voices. Just to go back, Terrell, you've used the word grassroots, and Ellen, you've used the word, some legal action that must be taken. So what's next for our student athletes right now? What can be done at a grassroots and public level to really get their voice out there so that they can continue this fight for equality?
I think one of the hardest things for grassroots organizations to do is to band together. They separate us by, Terrell, you're at Under Armour. guy. You're a Nike guy. You're an Adidas guy. So we can never, they're trying to make it really difficult to band together and share one voice. If we ever decided to come together, we control, and I said this a long time, and we control the oil. Mm-hmm. We're giving it away by not being together. So I think from the grassroots level, you have to come together. We have to get on the same page and understand that it's more than just a Nike deal, an Adidas deal, a Under Armour deal. It's more at stake. And if we can educate the parents at a younger, like when their kids are younger, if we can educate the student athlete, and they also hold the NBA or the promise of making money later through professional sports over the student athlete's head. So they don't want, the student athlete does not want to do anything that will jeopardize their career. So there's so many things on the other end, and they're not being educated. Why would you educate them to let them know that they have rights? So that's what we're here to do, to try to educate our student athletes, try to educate our parents. And the most important thing is education. We have to educate each other so that we can band together and hopefully get some things done.
I so appreciate everything that you just said, Terrell. I think you're absolutely right on point in terms of educating athletes about what their rights are, empowering them to take action, encouraging them to understand the power dynamics that separate them subtly and quite directly. You know, the other thing that I think that we need to be working on, and we really need to acknowledge in terms of understanding how this system works, is that that because athletes are not members of the NCAA, they do not have an entity that advocates for them. You know, if you look at the NFL or the NBA, they have players associations or some kind of an independent entity that advocates for athletes. And to me, this is an action step that absolutely has to be taken. And I know that we're close on time, so I'll close out on that. But I really think that that's the next critical phase and step.
Thank you both for getting this conversation started, for really invigorating us, calling the grassroots, calling us to action, calling us around education. Now we will transition to our panel discussion, which I'm really excited to dive into more. So I will be joined by Sunny Vaccaro, Dr. John Butler, and Tim Nevis about a more in-depth discussion about branding, legal rights, and individual ownership of name, image, and likeness. So welcome, everyone. I hope you're excited about our discussion. You know, I really think that Ellen and Terrell got the conversation started. They really kind of use some key words that I think are significant, words like exploitation and grassroots and action and interest and thinking about individual rights of students. And so I'm going to start with Sunny. Sunny, you have worked with some of the biggest names in sports. Could you tell us about how you were able to help young athletes benefit from their names, their images, and their likenesses? And how and why have things changed since then? And while we wait for Sunny to join us, I'm going to transition to Dr. Butler. So Dr. Butler, you have assisted so many former college athletes with starting businesses and creating their brands. Could you tell us more about some of the athletes of whom you've worked, and to what do you attribute their successes?
Absolutely. Of course, it's very interesting for me because, as you said, in the early days, we talked about attending a university and then doing well in business. So I myself have worked with a number of students here, whether it's at LSU, Charles Alexander. I'm a professor at the University of Texas. I'm working with Brady James now, who's doing a lot of great stuff. Corey Redding, who's a Longhorn, Vince Young, who's a former Longhorn. And I think they have created lots of wealth based on the whole idea of the connections after you finish school. So what we're really talking about then is to get academic with an institutional arrangement. That is, you enjoy the institution, you get little rewards, much like being a priest, or much like being in the all volunteer force. But after the all volunteer force, you would have a GI Bill when you can absolutely engage in that. So if you look at how the model changes, we're moving more from the institution to an occupational model. That is, you're asking the question, can athletes be paid as if they were in a union or if they were employees rather than students? And I think there are a number of issues. And let me put on my hat as I'm not an athletic director, but I certainly served on the athletic council at the University of Texas. And let me just put that hat on. I think that if you do that, first of all, you're talking about a small number of schools. So if you look at what I would refer to big time athletics, University of Texas, my alma mater, LSU, Georgia, that's big time athletics. But most colleges and universities in the NCAA, they really don't have that kind of budget. So the difference between the University of Texas and Abilene Christian, bless their heart, who wiped us last night, is that, our budget might be, I think our budget is 200+ million. Abilene's might be $1 million. The other thing you must realize, when you talk about this issue, is Title IX. We are not going to pay male athletes. We're not considering female athletes, no matter what they play. So therefore, the likeness, remember, comes from your name. And then it interacts with the uniform that you have on. And also, if we consider this question going forward, if I am a star athlete at Notre Dame, I will not be able to wear the Notre Dame jersey when I advertise myself. So one of the interesting things you begin to think about is, what is the relationship as we move from an institutional model, where you go, and the idea is that sports is very, very interesting. It's gotten very, very big. By the way, to me, the most interesting, important sports are the 200 basketball intramural games that we have at the University of Texas, which are just exciting sometimes as the regular stuff. So I think the big stuff is, given that the big league schools have so much money now, should they pay the athletes? Well, I think this will make my alma mater, we'll be in high cotton and doing good stuff. On the end, if I look at what's happening at Jackson State, well, Jackson State is trying to change the model of where kids are going. So therefore, right now, as we recruit at the University of Texas, as we recruit at LSU, the kids would have University of Texas, Alabama, Jackson State. That's where they might go. So how would Jackson State compete with a school like an LSU or Texas? So looking at the realistic of the outcome of the model, then what will happen is the gap between the haves and the have-nots will really get larger. So the big theoretical question is, how do you come up with the money, right, to pay only 30 schools in the NCAA, and what do you do with the rest of the schools? And I think that's the theoretical question. But certainly the question is going to continue to emerge. It's a great question to ask. I do not see the students as being exploited. I see them as having a great opportunity to attend a university. With me, attending undergrad at LSU and PhD at Northwestern University, I carry the Northwestern brand with me. And I could also ask the university, I think I'm a hell of a professor, and they only pay me so much. Let me put my course and brand my own course and put it on the internet instead of having 30 students. Let me have 1.5 million students around the globe. So I think that the big issue as an athletic director is how do we pay people? I think the question for the students is, my gosh, I'm doing all this work. I'm on national television. I'm winning national championships at about 2 or 3 schools, right? Most schools, and I'm an SEC guy. Most schools up north, not just worth a damn, excuse me. They haven't been worth a damn since they desegregated the southern schools. And remember, I finished from LSU a long, long time ago. So I think these are very, very interesting kind of questions. But the reality is, with Title IX and the fact that it's only a few schools, it's going to be difficult to do. But something has to change probably.
Dr. Butler, that's really interesting that you talked about this shift from this institutional arrangement to this occupational model. And I'm going to jump back to Sonny, because I think it's very relevant to the question. And Sonny, you've worked with some really large names in sport. And I think that this shifting of what's happened over time is really important in light of your experiences. Could you tell us how you have been able to help young athletes benefit from their name, image, and likenesses, and how and why have things changed over your career?
I'd like to beg forgiveness for what I'm going to do and say, okay, I can't answer that question because I've answered that 1,000 times. There's no need for it on this show. I would like to respond to or learn a friend opposite me in this thing. That would have started me out good, because I totally disagree with 99% of the things he said, in all honesty. But what I'm going to tell you is why we're here on Name, Image, and Likeness, and what I'm going to talk to everyone watching this on. Let me describe amateur is for everybody that doesn't know. An amateur was brought up by the English people who did everything to ruin America and start America, right? An amateur was someone who didn't make a living with their hands. The cricket grounds, which was the main sport we're talking about at that time, had two signs of entry. One that says for players, the other one for gentlemen. They already stigmatized who the players were. In the 1920s, Andrew Carnegie started the fund, okay? And his fund was to clean up amateur sports in America, because everybody, including probably some of my family or before then, didn't really go to school. Didn't really go to the University of Pittsburgh or Notre Dame or all those things to get an education, especially in the area I come from. They worked in the steel mills, they worked in the railroad, they worked in the coal mines, then they went to play a football game. Just so we understand, that's the reason the University of Chicago, one of the greatest, most esteemed academic schools in the world, ever said, let me get rid of this. So don't give me the amateurism stuff. Don't give me about the player stuff. Where we're at there, let's just get everyone on this program to center in on one thing. What the hell has the NCAA do? Have they been clean? Have they been good? I don't know. In the 1950s, they had a gambling scandal down at the University of Kentucky that preempted all the other gambling scandals, fixing points I'm talking about, where the players fixed points because they didn't get it. Oh, let me just remember now. That was Adolph Rupp. That's the University of Kentucky. That was the Southeastern Conference. That was great players. They won championships. You know what? Those kids were not cheated. The only guys who got put in jail were those kids. The only guy that made a living in the Hall of Fame is Adolph Rupp. Just so we understand, let's move on. Let's move on to New York City. Let's move on to NYU. Let's move on to Columbia. Let's move on to Bradley. Let's move on to all those schools. There were gambling scandals up until present. They haven't changed. In fact, my brother, who works in Las Vegas, stopped one that was about to happen with Arizona State in the 2000s. So where's the NCAA? Where's the NCAA, people? They're nowhere. What they did in the 1960s and 1970s, they woke up, said, whoa, what's happening in the 60s? Well, I'll tell you what was happening in the 60s. Black people were becoming relevant. Dr. King was marching. Tommy and Johnny and the kid from Peter Norman from Australia stood up on a stand one time and put their hands in revolution. They weren't so much about the academics and about the colleges, but they were the first ones to come out without anything to gain except freedom. Freedom for everybody. Let's stay on now this NCAA, because right after that, then the NCAA really got interested in what the hell was happening, because we had the Black Panthers. We had not only Dr. King racing to save the world and make everyone equal and not fight. We had a group of people that happened to be in California that were Black and called the Black Panthers. We had people like Angela Davis come out, Bobby Seals, all these guys, and all of a sudden the world was becoming active. We also had a war on. We had a war. People were fighting everywhere. Now let's go into the 70s. Oh, do you realize we had a 4-year scholarship for 4 years until 1973? What happened in 1973? Well, Walter Byers started, what the hell are we doing here? Up north in California and Wyoming and all these schools. I remember these because I read about them. I didn't know Tommy. There wasn't like in the 60s and 70s where you could go on the internet and pick up a story in 1 minute. It was maybe months before the kid from Pittsburgh saw Tommy and John and Peter's thing. It was a month before I even knew what the hell was happening on sports on the West Coast. But I'll tell you what happened. They took away the 4-year scholarship. Why did they do it? To give more power to the university and the coaches. Because when these Black guys, and most of them were Black up there, they were revolting. They weren't going to play some games. They were the first guys to walk out. They said, no, they said, the NCAA, let's take their scholarship. Let's put more control on them. That's what started the whole goddamn control thing. Let's go through the NCAA. Let's go through where Senator Karras finally become involved. I know you want to ask me a question, but let me go, okay? Yeah. Let me go. I know, I apologize to everybody listening, but you'll break my train of thought. Let's start with the NCAA. I got involved with them because they hated Jerry Tarkanian. That's right, because Jerry was this guy who was on the verge of being the other guy down at UCLA with some kids from Long Beach State that was becoming really, really good. And Jerry Tarkanian was one of the best friends in my life. I was very close to most of the kids in his team. Let me just tell you a story. Jerry Tarkanian was blamed for everything that went wrong in the history of basketball, and the other people at UCLA were freed of evidence. Why do I say this? because I got brought into the NCAA because of Jerry. He was my friend. I knew a lot of the players. They actually, the NCAA, and I'll just get right to the point. They were suing him because he's suing the NCAA. They wanted to put him in jail or the NCAA probation. That's what they called it, right? And they put me on, after the court case was over, I see my name on this docket. They want to investigate me. And then what they did now, the NCAA, they didn't just get investigators. They got the FBI guys who were working for the FBI were now working. The FBI was working for the NCAA in the 1980s. Dr. King knows that, only it wasn't the NCAA. It was that guy running the FBI. Huh? Now he was lend-leasing. So I find out about this. Why? Because a guy named Hal McMinimum flies to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, flies to Pittsburgh to interrogate me about a kid named Jeep Kelly, who went to play for Jerry Tarkanian. This doesn't make any sense to you kids, but I'm gonna tell you what, this guy come out there and he wanted me to turn like what? That I knew something on Tarkanian. If they didn't turn, they told me, we know all about you, Vaccaro. I was Italian, I was all the other things we written. I was supposed to be holding the mob. I'm saying this to you now, I've never said this before, but this is a good audience I got now. And I'm gonna tell you the damn story that we're trying to defend the NCAA. They ain't worth defending. They've never done a thing for kids. Why do they say McMinimum? Because later they did find that I may or may not have been, declaring my income tax or some damn thing, okay? I got, seriously. So let's go on. Let's go on to the next thing. They buy the NIT in the 1980s. They buy this other entity that had games. Now, also, the most important thing that happened for the NCAA was name, image, and likeness. See, no one knew it then. No one knew it, but the kids were going to school, and I hope, because my wife Pam was a very, very successful commercial actress, and she asked me one day, Sonny, do these kids get residuals from those? It was the classic games, the Southeastern Conference, the NCAA tournaments, and I said, I don't know. I did not know, and then so I asked around. By fate itself, and because as Michael knows, and a lot of people want to know a little bit about me, I talked to everybody and inquisitive, but I understood the athletes all my life, to answer your question. I knew those kids you want me to talk about, right? But I'm going to tell you what happened on the way to the office, okay? Steve Greenberg and Brian Bodell owned Classic Sports. They came to me because at that time I'm running camps. I had the longest running all-star game in America of high school players. They wanted to buy my films, just like Classic Sports. And I said, no, that's how stupid I was and still am, I guess. I said, no, I'm going to be pure. But they sold it to the NCAA. The NCAA bought it. $117 million ESPN paid for the rights in 1997. That started the whole damn thing. Oh, about those rights, do you guys know that about 1995 or 94 or somewhere, the NCAA started realizing that these games and those things were things. They inserted the part of the scholarship papers inside the papers of these parents taking those kids, as my learned friend Terrell said, everybody wanted the scholarship. Everyone they wanted to go to college and not to pros at those times. They send it in the middle. And these kids just signed it. They signed over their name, image, and likeness on a piece of paper that they didn't know what the hell it was. The only thing I can say right now, and I want to continue for a few more minutes, the only person that owns my name, image, and likeness is the good Lord and my parents. That we can sell this into perpetuity is beyond comprehension. And anyone watching this, if you have any feeling at all about anything, and you don't even have to like athletes, and you have to go with the good doctor says, and he was trying to protect LSU, Texas just hired a coach that didn't give a damn about flying the flag. Okay, they paid $10 million. They just fired the damn guy. They don't worry about money because it's flowing in. The money, just like Perone, right? And the money keeps flowing in, and the money keeps flowing in. And that's what it does with the NCAA. So now we go forward. Now we're going forward, and I'm getting past my whole thing. Okay, you stop me when you're ready. What I'm going to tell you.
No, the only reason why I wanted to jump in, because I think this is interesting, because a lot of individuals who are on this call might not realize this lingered history of unethical behavior at multiple levels. You've discussed financial, hiring, and tying into professional college sports, stripping away the power of individual institutions and individuals themselves. So I just wanted to bring Tim in just really, really quickly, because one of the things that I think is interesting is when we start thinking about the publicity of what you've talked about, right? You've talked about marketing, you've talked about branding, you've talked about ESPN. And so I'm just going to bring Tim in because I want to come back to something about ethics of what you're talking about, Sonny. So I have a specific question for you, but Tim, to bring you into this conversation, I'm really interested in what Sonny has talked about with this fairness and this ethical piece. I'm interested in building off of what Dr. Butler talked about the interest and the ownership that individual institutions have in this protection that we feel like as employees and student athletes as students might have in this. But then there's this thing about publicity. What's being said? So could you talk to us in a broader way about the publicity? What's being said about NIL? What should student athletes and others be thinking about when we start thinking about the media and the branding piece?
Yeah, so I think you hit on the right term, which is publicity, because name, image, and likeness, it's essentially, it's a legal concept, and it's the right of publicity. So everyone in our country has the ability to control and use their identity, which is otherwise known as your name, image, and likeness, for profit or not. So as an example, if someone takes a photo of you in the street and it makes the newspaper, there aren't many rights around that because the newspaper is a news outlet. It's different though if they take that same picture, they post it on a billboard and it says buy Coca-Cola. All of a sudden they are using your image to sell a commercial product, and that's against the law. And so you have without permission, that is. So you have the ability to send them a cease and desist letter, say, take that down, you don't have my permission, or to be paid by them for the right to use your image for a commercial use. So in college athletes simply don't have that right. And I am going to read to you from a letter that was sent to a commercial vendor about one of my clients just recently, telling them, hey, you can't use that photo on your website because that's one of our student athletes. I don't like to use that term, but it's a college athlete. And therefore you have to take that down because his identity is actually owned by us, the university. In this letter sent to this commercial entity, it says you have to take the photo down. And in doing so, it says the university's student athletes own their name and likeness and have provided permission only to the university to utilize that name and likeness while they participate as an NCAA athlete, essentially. The point of that is the university effectively owns your name and likeness as an athlete while you were in college. And the reason, I mean, you can see why that's a problem, because everyone else in virtually every other corner of the country, every other industry has the ability to control their name and likeness, whether that's for profit or you say, I just don't want other people profiting off of my name and likeness. And so there's a discussion around this topic because for a variety of reasons, but including that people are starting to notice that this is a problem, that there are billions of dollars being made in this industry, to Dr. Butler's point. And the athletes, since essentially the 1950s, have only been provided a scholarship. Now, there's been some recent allowances beyond that, but that's effectively what the rules have allowed for. What we're talking about with name, image, and likeness is not money within the system. So essentially, not the revenues that are generated by the schools, not the ticket sales, not the broadcast agreements, that money that goes to the schools and to the coaches and to fund the programs. We're talking about money from third parties, outside entities. So this isn't necessarily about pay for play, as they say. This is about whether someone can go out, strike an agreement with Coca-Cola, get paid for their picture to be on a billboard, and be paid by that outside entity, the brand sponsor. Now,
I like that. And my question is, if you're going to do that, why not just start it to get away from the colleges? And thank you for that history. You know, I'm not as young as I look. I was the first in the SEC, and the people who started Black Panthers were my cousins. and I went to college in 1965 with Maravich to desegregate the SEC, and then College Temple became the first college one behind me. So I went through all of that. But here's the deal: if the colleges or universities, I mean, in America, what you do, you go do something else. I mean, why mess with the colleges and universities? If the kids can do that, let's start another institutional league. Because I think what the colleges would do, they would go back to intramural sports. They would change the model, and realizing that you're only talking about a few sports when a few colleges and universities that make money, in athletics. University of Texas, Austin, LSU, yes, we do extremely well. We have individuals who they love the university. We raise money. It's been good. But I tell you what, the parties are just as good as Southwest Texas and Texas State and Texas Arlington. Same parties, same crawfish, same good times. When I went from LSU to Northwestern, the kids at Northwestern had the same parties, they were losing. So I think that my question is, if you really want to have an image that you own, start another league like we did in baseball. Do a league that's for profit, where the kids can get paid and see exactly how they can do. So if we look at the history of sports, which I was very much a part of, and to me, when I was in high school, the best teams were in Black school. I think that Grambling Willis Reed had the best college basketball team, by the way, not UCLA. I thought that Prairie View had the best football team and not the University of Texas. And I think that if you look at what has happened, the competition and the interaction between television. So television is what changed the model for so many schools. So when I was in school, there was only one. We looked forward to watching Kentucky. There was the one game on television. There was no money flowing. But with the money flowing and so much money out there, get away from college and university, start your own division league, right? And then let the kids choose whether or not they want to go to college, and revert to colleges, go back to intramural sports where people just play each other in terms of not a scholarship, do like the Ivy League. There's no scholarship at Harvard to go to college. There's no scholarship at Morehouse to go to college. And if you go, so it's a lot of things that's happening, but why would you continue to beat your head against an organization? Just start your own organization and do another league and then let them go from that league to the pros.
So, I'm going to hop in here because I want to kind of bring us current to where we are. So we're in the midst of March Madness right now, right? And so
LSU is playing too, my God. Thank you for telling me. Wow. Goodbye.
Over the last few days, and we've really seen this hashtag pop up on social media. There's some hype around the hashtag not NCAA property. It's gained significant traction. There are several articles and major news outlets about it as a call from players who believe that the NCAA sees them as sources of money and dollar signs, rather than these talented athletes who deserve equal freedoms and also to benefit fairly from their name, image, and likeness. Now, on top of that, we've also seen the controversy about the inequities that our women's sports we're experiencing from the women's basketball tournament, and also in difference from the March Madness branding and the hype that it's March Madness, the basketball tournament, then there's the women's tournament, right? So there's some inequities. I'm thinking about Tim talking about publicity. I'm thinking about Dr. Butler, you discussing Title IX, and I'm thinking about you, Sonny, really thinking through this lingered history of an unethical treatment of all athletes. Because if we really want to add to the history, we can talk about the AIAW and interest convergence and wanting to benefit from the women's competitiveness as well. But I want to bring you all in on that. What should our athletes be doing right now? This hashtag not NCAA property is significant, especially when we think about our Black athletes who are descendants of enslaved Black individuals and Black persons in America. The term property resonates very strongly with me as a former D1 track and field athlete. And when I think about them having to advocate not to be considered property, we really have to bring in the gender intersectionality, and we have to think about the ethics. And so, Sonny, I'm going to toss it to you, and then each one of you, as you want to participate, please hop in.
The only thing I asked here right off the top, but okay, and I don't want to get in arguments or disagreements. I respect everybody who's here. Cecilia's answers I've ever heard in my life first of all, LSU should be on probation because all the teams, or all the schools that were involved in the criminal justice system that got implicated in the biggest scandal in the world, only done by the university's presidents, the athletic directors, and the ones that went to school or went to jail were the assistant coaches, no head coach. You talk about LSU. I'm not picking on LSU. It's a fact. I'm talking about all this. Let me go for a minute. Okay. I'm just saying it's ridiculous what we're talking about here. And if you think that you can just go start another league, why the hell should they start a league? I want someone to tell me why the only two sports that are branded that they have to do these things and split the money are football and basketball. Well, what Gary Charles did with ABIS is one of the nicest and biggest things I've ever seen in my lifetime. I've been around. I want to tell you something else that I've been around and I've seen. The majority of the kids, and you brought up girls sports, the girls can benefit because girls have made more advancement than the men in the last 10 years on equality. The girls are my new heroes in life, and they can earn a good living on name, image, and likeness also. But I just want to stick on one thing. How the hell can anyone sit around a coffee table and think that this tournament thing is on? They send these kids to Indiana. They put them out there to sit. They're going to quarantine their butts. They're going to pray that they don't get COVID. That's what they're doing. They got to play the damn games. They moved the Rose Bowl to Texas or some goddamn place. It's all about the money. They don't care about the athletes. And all due respect to everyone on this board, I'm on the athlete side. I have been from day one. And three people that should be in the Hall of Fame, and ABIS should put them in there right away, is John Carlos and Tommy Smith, and put the white kid in from Australia too, because they fought for everybody. I don't think the NCAA and the college presidents and the heads of these conferences, you sit there and you say they gave $20 million to a commissioner from goddamn the Big Ten. What the hell did he do? What the hell does anybody do? The players make the game. You want a good thing? They should all go on strike. Let's see what the hell CBS does and 5 networks. I can't take this anymore. The athletes have rights, not the schools. The schools don't have the rights for your name, image, and likeness. They have the right to offer you a scholarship. You know what, sir? What if I pay my own way to one of your great schools? What if they don't try? Then let me do what I want with my life. I'll come play football for LSU. I'll go for Alabama. No. Well, why don't you accept my money? Because you want to indebt me. Because half the money isn't real money. It's an empty chair. I want you to explain North Carolina. I want you to explain Minnesota. I want you to explain the academics. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. They hit from everything in the House bill trial. Excuse me.
Yeah, let's get back to it.
You interrupt somebody else now.
Yeah,
okay.
I remember
I just went through the House bill trial. I went through the lady from the NCAA, and then Mary Willingham. I mean, that lady turned the whole thing. What North Carolina, the Harvard of the South? Shit, nobody had to go to school. That's what you're advocating. I can't take it. Next, taking.
I think that I remember when Sears and Roebuck was a big deal. It doesn't exist anymore. I think things change. I don't think you have to have the same system. I remember when Microdale didn't exist. I remember when Microsoft didn't exist. So you got to get off your historical crap and look to the future. So why not take the universities out and create a better product? My question is not all the historical bullshit that Sonny's talking about, but how do you pay the athletes? Sonny's not going to raise the money to pay the athletes who go to Southwest Texas and Texas State and the small schools. The only thing he has is a pie in the sky idea about equality, which, by the way, is an interesting term in itself. But the point is, the question is, how do you change the model? The model is there and the money is flowing, and how do you change the model? You don't go on strike. What you do is you create something else. So I can visualize, for example, students themselves, yes, creating at other schools a whole nother league that's not the NCAA. We certainly have done it in business enterprise. I remember when Herb Kelleher did Southwest Airlines and wiped out all of TWA and et cetera. I remember when all of the other people worked out Sears and Roebuck. So if you have an innovative mind, you cannot say this is it. You have to do something else. And if the student athletes are so strong, just do something else. I mean, you do not have to go play at the University of Michigan. And you're exactly right. If I go to college, I play basketball. I'm going to play basketball whether or not I'm on scholarship or not. Hell, I still go try to run and play because I love the game. So the issue is very interesting. And it's not all the other stuff that's happening in the NCAA. The question is what would be the model to pay the athletes? And the answer is you have to generate and give them their name and likeness. Nothing wrong with that. Let them make money on their name and likeness. And remember, it's interactive. So I can tell you this, if they played for Notre Dame, when they advertised, they would not have a Notre Dame uniform on. If they played because that is what they're going to do. So
How about if we do this? How about if we do this? Tim, can I impose on your time?
Wait, but let me finish.
How about if we do this?
So, Sonia, I want you to think about another model. And the other model.
I'm going to give you another model. How about all the money that you're worried about Nike giving them and wearing a shirt? How about if we do this? How about if all the people who sponsor all the events give 50% to the athletes in a poll?
There you go.
The other 50%, you're trying to make up a league that take 10,000 years. I'll tell you what the difference between the historically Black college and university. If they were allowed to have name, image, and likeness, if we could do that, these kids may go to the lesser school.
They're going to go because they have another model. Jackson State is setting the model.
Image and likeness is irrefutable. But that's the one thing that your partners in the NCAA stole from these kids. They stole their name. They stole it. Can't you understand my logic here?
I understand that. When I go work for IBM, Sonia, when I go work for IBM, everything I invent belongs to IBM.
You know what? That's a company. You don't have to work for them. Quit. Go get another job. This is the company. The NCAA is a non-profit organization of education. They're not a football factory.
My point is this.
I hope somebody
has to go play sports. Nobody has to go play sports. Go do something else where you can make some money. But what I'm saying in this, Sonia, I want to try to bring you along. It looks like you are I can't get to you though, but here's the deal. The model is here. Think on the business. Get away from your emotional side and think dollars and cents. How are we going to pay everybody involved? What would be the new model? I like that idea about some of it going to some other people and some of it going to other people. All right, will Earl Campbell make all of the money? Will the person who is less likely, who don't know, what can they do? I said, give it to them, let it be a free market, and let's see what happens.
But one of the things,
that would not change all the corruption. Probably get worse, by the way.
I don't think we can change the corruption, but one thing I want to do is make sure that we use some of this time as well to give options to athletes who might be watching this and parents who might be watching this, to go back to Terrell's earlier point when we first started. What are the options currently that our student athletes can do? How can we provide additional opportunities? And I'm going to toss it over to Tim, because I saw in the chat box you talked about that there are some different opportunities that we can have. How it would be bigger than just basketball and football.
Yeah, so I'll talk just briefly about those points and then mention to the opportunities that exist for all college athletes, hopefully soon. In terms of, the IBM comparison, you own the patent, you got to negotiate. You have an opportunity to negotiate your contract. College athletes don't. In terms of, Dr. Butler, I think that it's a philosophical difference here, but in terms of restricting the rights of the athletes, there's no legal basis for it. There's no economic basis for it, and arguably there are arguably some illegal treatments that are happening. And this is before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will chime in on this. If you take IBM, Microsoft, Google, etc., and they all get together and they say, we're not going to hire anybody unless they're only paid $20,000, that's against the law. And it's the same thing that's happening right now, and it'll be decided soon. In terms of these, the money within the system, the NCAA has said for ages that there's only 30 schools that make money in college sports, and yet record revenues year after year. And so it defies logic that that the system is not generating money, because they're actually generating $15 billion. It's how they spend it. And they spend consistent with their values. Those values have largely reflected that it's not about education. It's not about health and safety. It's about, like Sonny said, it's about making money. And that's just how they've done it. And it's how they continue to do it today. So finally, we're at the point where people have stepped up and said, at a minimum, college athletes should be given the right to their publicity in this multi-billion-dollar system. And so as a result of that, state legislation led by California was originally proposed in 2019. that was signed into law and is to take effect in 2023, followed by 30 plus other states then that have proposed legislation. 6 states have passed legislation. The earliest effective date is July 1st in Florida, this coming July. Upon that date, pending some legal action, college athletes at universities in the state of Florida will have their right of publicity, potentially with some carve outs, but that means that they'll be able to do everything from pay Coca-Cola, like I mentioned on the billboard, sign the endorsement deal with a major, company like that, or a local company, whether it's your local cafe or ice cream store, things like that. And also utilize their name for a variety of other things. The modern day billboard is social media. So you can post a tweet, a message on Instagram, and get paid for that by the brands that you're endorsing. Here are the other things they can do. They can run a football camp or a basketball camp. They can get paid to provide lessons to younger athletes and start their own business. There's self-employment opportunities. These opportunities, go far beyond just there's a lot of talk about top 1 to 2% of athletes, basketball and football, are going to make some money. And yeah, that's going to be the case on your traditional type of endorsement deals. But there's a variety of opportunities that are going to exist for these other athletes, especially women, because women have many fewer professional opportunities in sports, and therefore oftentimes the height of their popularity occurs while they're in college. I'll give you one example that really stands out to me. I'll give you a couple examples. Katie Ledecky, who's a gold medal swimmer for the United States, she basically withdrew from the Stanford swim team in order to be able to endorse some products so she could get money for training. Now, no one can say that college sports is better off without Katie Ledecky in it. But if you change the rule, all of a sudden she's still swimming for Stanford. You have a young woman, Arike Ngumbawale. She was a point guard for University of Notre Dame. She's in the WNBA now. In some of the most historic shots you've ever seen in men's or women's basketball, she hits back-to-back buzzer beaters in the Final Four and the championship. She gets invited to go on Dancing with the Stars and has all of this publicity surrounding her, but she can't take advantage of it. That's a huge opportunity. And then going down to, just the other opportunities that exist, like on social media. Donald De La Haye, he's a kickoff specialist for University of Central Florida, and he has a YouTube channel that's based on his engaging personality. People like to follow him. He gets 6 million followers, and he has to make a decision. You either shut down your YouTube channel or you don't play football for the University of Central Florida anymore. So there's a variety of options and opportunities that are going to exist for college athletes. It's a matter of changing the rules, which are in the works. We're going to know pretty soon what those rules are going to look like, and it's going to open up a wealth of possibilities, not just for your top athletes, but for self-employment, camps, clinics, etc.
I agree with that, Tim. I think they should pay taxes too, like everybody else. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. The question, if they want to do that, that's fine. And I think that what that does, it takes the NC out of it, and that's a choice that you do, and that's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So right now, what we're talking about in terms of who benefits, certainly that would benefit the student athlete, and I think that's a great thing. And I also think that from changing the model from the institution to the occupation is moving more to that occupational model, and I think that's a choice. And I think when that changes, I think that'll be good to see. It'll be good to happen. But it still doesn't take away the tremendous amount of money that's being done by the NCAA. I think it's going to create more interesting things between teammates, practice time, and all kinds of situations like that. But in America, you should not be able to stop people from doing well and making a living, and that should be a law.
There's one key stakeholder in this that I think about, and I think about parents. And Terrell brought this up in the first beginning of this. How would you all talk to parents? How would you speak to parents? What would you say to them as they are investing, through time and money, and they're investing in their children to support them to make decisions to go to school and also to advance their careers in sport? What would you say to parents in light of what we're talking about? I mean, this is some passionate stuff because athletes have received such a poor showing of fairness and respect and care on all levels. And so what can we say to parents whose children might be on this AAU path or on this conveyor belt, which is a model that people have talked about, particularly women who might, I'm thinking of, I have a daughter who's going to be a future gymnast or swimmer. Those are her things. What should I be thinking about when I'm preparing and supporting her so that she is not exploited like our current athletes are being?
Well, I'm a parent, and I told my son, and I play, I'm a fourth generation college graduate, and I'm from Louisiana. And my parents talked to me, I was in the same with the Elvin Hayes and the Don Chaners. They're all my great friends. Me and Big A are great friends, and you have to put the emphasis on finish school. You don't, as I like to, I told my son, don't let athletes be your heroes. You have to be your own hero. And the most important thing is you save Doctor the money for her to go to college. My parents paid my way to school. Parents pay their way to school at Hampton and Morehouse and Spelman. There are not many scholarships involved. So my point is, hey, I played everything, and I'm the greatest guitarist in the world. I'm not making a living at it. I'm the greatest singer in the world. But you have to put the emphasis, I think, on, hey, if you want to go to, nothing's wrong with not going to college. A lot of people don't go to college. They're very, very successful. But if you come from a family where college is important, then you put the emphasis on going to college. And athletics will certainly take care of itself. And if all of a sudden you have someone who can really make some money doing it, what a bonus that is.
I think that's a really good point. I'm a first gen whose parents could not afford for me to go to college. I'm from a very small town, and the fact that I even went to UVA was a major deal. Sonny, I'm gonna shoot the question to you. When you really highlighted this exploitative system, what would you say to parents right now?
Go on strike. That's what I'd say. What you do is somehow, some way, the athletes got to stand up for something on their dime. They got to stand up. It's their dime now. Okay. Every once in a while, like the two kids from Rutgers, I was hurt that they lost because they didn't get another couple of days in that spotlight. But there are some other things that I'd like to go to Dr. Butler on. The bowl games. Bowl games are independently run by independent people who make millions of dollars. The Chick-fil-A Bowl makes a football game I'm talking about, okay? There's a guy in Florida that runs a bowl game, one bowl game a year. He gets paid $1 million to run a football bowl game in January. These things are ridiculous. And the other thing I want to tell NCAA, their cost effectiveness of being the NCAA, it cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. The O'Bannon case ended up with $60 million for O'Bannon and the plaintiffs. 25,000 athletes got between 5 and 15,000. Eddie was at the top, him and 5 other of the lead plaintiffs. He got 15. The other kids, $60 million. You know how many times the NCAA goes to court and loses or ties? Their best thing is they settle. That's what they do well. They're settled, okay? As I said earlier in my shot, they bought the NIT. They'll now have a thing for, it's called the virus Final Four or some damn thing, and they'll have the trademark to that too. All I'm asking the athletes to do, when I say go on strike, that's a hard thing, and all the kids shouldn't and won't go on strike, whatever. But there has to be a kind of reckoning, and it shouldn't be up to the athletes to be looking out for themselves. It should be up for the adults in the room to say one thing: the NCAA is a money-making situation. And Dr. Butler, I'm not picking on you, and I respect the hell what you've done in your life, okay, and the times you come up with. I did too, mirroring it on a different side of the fence, okay? But I'm just gonna say something. Your son's different. He had the opportunity to have someone like you that was a good parent and made a lot of money and did a lot of things. That's good. But a lot of the kids that I've run across, and your earlier question was, that wasn't always the case. And it wasn't the case in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And then when I hooked up with Gary Charles in the 90s, and Gary sort of took over everything in youth basketball, and going back to Terrell, I've seen the other side of the coin. I've seen where they didn't have money to get to a tournament, or they didn't have money to stay over, to get exposure. The most important thing for a young athlete in the minds of the parents and the children are to get exposure, first to get the scholarship, second is all to be a pro. But now, as I said earlier, and Tim so aptly said, the girls through soccer, gymnastics, swimming, what these young ladies have done more from sports than LeBron and Michael and all the other guys. You know why? LeBron had people before him that led the way. thousands of black athletes, some of the greatest black athletes I ever saw. I didn't get to see them. I knew who they were. Went to the black colleges, the basketball and the football. The only reason they're not in the all-time greats is because they went right from Grambling to the NFL. They went right to Winston-Salem to the NBA. I know Charlie Cooper. I know Duquesne. I know how it all started. The greatest thing in my life that God gave me and my parents is my mind and my ability to like think what the other person's going through, because I was another person once. Let me just tell you, this isn't as complicated as it sounds, young lady. It isn't. All we have to do is get these arrogant people in Indianapolis to go behind their multi-million-dollar building. They actually moved a goddamn building from Kansas City to, they did everything. And they cannot be, and maybe you'll cut me off now, but let me say that, they cannot be the judge and the jury of the athletes. Right here, can you all read it? It says, top enforcement officer of the NCAA is ousted. In the 2013, when the University of Miami took him to court, there was so much illegal things happening. A guy named Shapiro bought the whole goddamn school, including the athletic director, but they all got away. They all got away except the athletes. The athletes were branded for life. They fired people. There was a girl on an airplane, 2 NCAA investigators, Tim, you used to be part of this. You might have been there that year, that heard somebody say about a kid that I knew pretty well, that he was taking money from school. He went on probation. Those kids' names are ruined for life. The thing that I know, some of those kids that got implicated in the shoe scandal with the universities and Nike and Adidas and Reebok, all that, they got a felony on their record. They can't vote, they can't get a job, they can't get anything. What the hell's the NCAA got? They're all playing in the Final Four, the Final Two, the Final One, the national football things. No one kept score of the bodies and people and the souls that were hurt. Go ahead.
No, your passion is really important, because I don't always think that individual student athletes see people, like actually see and feel that there are people that really want the best for them. So I appreciate your passion. We have about 10 minutes left of this segment. And so what I wanted to do is switch over to some of the audience questions. We have a question in the Q&A box. It was directed to Tim. It said, which state's NIL legislation do you think has the most favorable and likely to be adopted first? And why do conservatives favor the legislation?
That's a good question. I mean, so I'll start off by saying 6 states have already approved the legislation, and so it's passed. There's 20 some more that are waiting for a vote and potentially to be signed into law. Perhaps more importantly, are these federal bills. There have been 6 proposed bills, either last congressional session or this one, that are going to move forward, and they'll probably move forward middle to late this year. And we'll see what the regulations and the caveats call for. In terms of, conservatives being in favor of this truly is a bipartisan issue that people are getting behind. And even the general public, I mean, the surveys show that most people are in favor of athletes getting their rights of publicity, name, image, and likeness. Part of the reason is because there's no legitimate basis to restrict it, and everyone looks at this scenario and they say, okay, I understand maybe not paying the players through a contract as an employee of the school, but they can't go out and endorse the, local tire shop. They can't put a post on Instagram and make a little extra cash. It seems very unreasonable. And so most people see that. From a conservative political and philosophical standpoint, it's interesting because as free market enterprise is one of the pillars of conservative politics. And that means that you're worth what you're worth in the open market. But that's restricted in college sports and in a variety of ways. And so I think that's one of the reasons why conservatives are in favor of this, but I do think that it's bipartisan. It doesn't have to be hashed out that way. What I would say is that I wish more conservatives would stand behind the aspects of the legislation that address more directly health and safety, education attainment, and economic and racial equality, because those are critical aspects of this. We love to talk about whether the players should be paid or not, but we're overlooking some critical elements in this system. And I'll give you just a statistic that is striking, that when you have 3%, this is the 65 schools in the Power 5 conferences, the richest schools, 3% of the undergraduates at those schools are Black men. But Black men make up 56 and 55% of the men's basketball and football teams at those schools. Meanwhile, they graduate at significantly lower rates. In men's basketball, it's 37% lower than the undergraduate population. In football, it's 22% lower, suggesting that not only is there a racial disparity, the economics of this are also unequal, especially because the sports are largely driven by Black men who are restricted in terms of their rights. But the one thing that they are promised, this education, this free ride, many of them are not getting it. And even those that get to graduation, many of them are not prepared for life beyond sports because they are shuffled into majors with watered down courses. There's people that are doing their coursework for them sometimes. And that's not on the athletes, that's on the adults that are in charge saying, don't you worry about that. We're gonna get you on the field, we're gonna get you on the court doing what you love. Don't worry so much about school. And that's a serious problem. And so I mean, to the legislatures, I hope, continue to focus on not only name, image, and likeness, but these other critical issues that are deficient in this current system.
I think you're right. That is a bipartisan issue. And we're seeing it with the college student athlete rights. There's this movement to really protect the athletes at a state and federal level, which demonstrates the gravity of this. Just to close out, we have one more question. I'm gonna toss it to Dr. Butler and then to Sonny. What role do the corporate sponsors play in the current exploitation of athletes, and how can they assist in the reform?
What corporate sponsors do is they sponsor the university. So what happens is, well, it's a business school, you know, we have the Redmond Combs School of Business here, we have the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern. So corporate sponsors give to the university, and a percentage of that would go to athletics, to do the facilities and et cetera. But here, UT Austin is completely separate from the academic side. So the corporate sponsors themselves will support the university in different kind of ways. And as we like to say, it's hard to sing the fight song in a math class. They also like to give to themselves. So without the corporate sponsors, then the coaches wouldn't make as much money and those kind of things. So the base coach of a coach at a big school might be, you know, $200,000, but his salary comes from television and all of that kind of stuff, and those kind of things. So corporate sponsors are part of all universities, or they're part of everything that we do. And in a capitalist society, like we have a market economy, it's going to be based on market economists. And these are wealthy people who give to the university because they feel that they can help the university. But remember that we do live in a market economy. We live in a capitalist society. And the question is, how do you make things go? And they make things go through corporate sponsors. And the other thing is that I keep saying, you know, if you know, you can have the choice. I deal with students all the time. And I said, you have to take advantage of the university. I reject the idea that students are not responsible for their own education. I think that, you know, we have had people who refuse to go to class because their parents said you would go to class. So I'm not going to get in this pimping off Black Americans. And when it comes to, so the deal, you know, at Texas, we're talking about diversity. Well, let's make our football team 4%, only 4% Black and the rest white students. So we can recreate our white students. So I look at these schools that I went when they would not allow me to play in the SEC because I was Black. And all of a sudden, I look at the SEC now, it looks like the swag. So where are the white kids? So if you want to get behind some kind of movement, let's make the schools teams look just like the percentage of Blacks that they have in the student body. Now that would be diversity. As of now, diversity is only in the university and not on athletics.
And also to toss the same question to you, Sonny, what role do the corporate sponsors play in the current exploitation of athletes, and how can they assist in the reform?
They own the schools. They own them, okay? Let's forget about all this stuff, okay? They own them. When I gave money to the coaches in 1977, I gave it directly to the coaches. That was 1977. Nike gave me money to pay college coaches, and I told them they'll sell shoes because the kids will wear them, and the high school kids never might buy them. In 1986, we made the first all-school deal at the University of Miami. When I signed them the Nike contract, I called Phil Knight. I said, "You now own the university." Why? Because Miami wanted to be an all-school deal. Once we owned the whole school, sir, we owned the whole damn school. And part of that was we paid independently to the coaches. When you say the money is split up, it isn't split up. At a private school like Duke, Mike Krzyzewski has his own private thing because he doesn't have to explain anything. It's a private school. Notre Dame is a private school. Whatever they want to do for their coaches, Nike, Adidas, Reebok, any shoe company is going to do it. All they give a damn about is whether we sell the shoes. When we owned the bookstores in 1987, we owned the whole university. That was my cry. That was my Yahoo cry, okay, to Phil Knight. So I'm saying to you, young lady, and to the people listening to it, do you follow the FBI in a case against all these schools, including LSU and Auburn and everybody? I mean, Louisville. Do you understand what happened there? The president and the athletic director signed off a major deal with either Under Armour, Adidas, or Nike, just so we understand. They gave them millions of dollars. Why did we give them millions of dollars? Why did I pay John Thompson more than anybody when I was running Nike? I'll tell you why. John Thompson was the most powerful, best, and those kids were one of the greatest teams in the history of mankind. It was an investment in selling shoes. It wasn't like John was my personal friend and I took it out of my pocket. Phil Knight did it, and so did the guy from Adidas, and so did the guy from Reebok. So let's get past all this. They do it, it's a business. Private schools got a lot of leeway. The only way that'll be free, and you're worried about they wear a Nike uniform and they're gonna wear an Under Armour t-shirt. Well, you know what? So what? Why shouldn't they? They're paying the money because that kid's wearing the damn shirt. That's all. But I'll tell you what can happen. You said something very, very true. Notre Dame or the likes of Notre Dame and LSU or whatever across America, if there was name, image, and likeness, and you go back to the small town school, you go back to the historical black colleges, okay, where the local communities will support these kids like could. What I'm going to say here, marketing is the key to athletics. There is nothing. Ever since Bear Bryant saw Sam Cunningham drop over the line, score 4 touchdowns against Southern Cal against Alabama, blacks became prevalent in the South.
He could have gone to Alabama A&M and got his ass whipped. He didn't have to go all the way to California.
Well, he may have gone, but I'll tell you one thing. He didn't want that embarrassment, so he got probably more money. I'm not getting on Bear's case, but the kids wouldn't have gone in, and you know that, sir. You know that. You were an extremely good athlete. I checked on you. You were a good man, and I'll tell you what you are. You're a good parent, and you're a smart man, but you're on the wrong page of history in this one.
Well,
the kids are going to win.
The question is, what's the model? What's the model? Yeah.
Well, if it's a democracy, then give them the rights. Tim said it eloquently. Tim
I'm not against the rights. I'm just saying what is going to play out. You know, I consider them against. You just have to look at
the extreme thing. Someone's got to be John Carlos and Tommy Smith. That's all. Someone's got to be a kid named Dick DeVinzio a long time ago, where he said, we deserve something. I honestly believe the easiest thing in society right now is the term. I would like total free. I like Senator Murphy's bill personally. I don't like splitting the baby. I know Senator Booker wants to give away antitrust. I got to get this in. We can't give away antitrust. Once we give away antitrust, the NCAA will be knocking at that, and we won't even win the name, image, and likeness thing 5 years from now. We got to hold on. I look for freedom for everybody. That's what I look for. Go to their schools. And you know what? If you guys don't want them at LSU, don't take them. That's okay. They'll find a place to go. And you know what? They'll be fine. They'll be fine. They go to LSU because they get the best players. And I was there. I was at an LSU home game when they had the Tiger Long, when Dale Brown was coach. One of the greatest Saturday evenings I ever spent in my life was in Baton Rouge. Also, just so you understand, I promoted the game in the Superdome. 64,000 people with Notre Dame and LSU. 64,000, and we gave all the money. No shoe company did anything. I worked for Nike, and both schools were wearing Adidas or Converse or some damn thing. It can work because the athletes are the reason that game was televised.
The question is, what would a model be? Nobody's questioning whether or not you should own anything. The question is, what would a model be?
Why doesn't your side, sir? Why don't they come up with something instead of kicking a can down the street? I
don't represent the NCAA.
They got a break because all of a sudden the Supreme Court's going to hear it. They should have heard this case in O'Bannon. They should have settled everything in O'Bannon. We could have been all done with this.
Well, I follow.
They left in antitrust.
Kids will go to school, and I think everybody supports it. The question is, what would the model be? I don't know anybody who's against it. The question is, what would the model be?
Everyone's talking about, and the young lady's talking about, we all got to be bipartisan. Tamika, you're right. It's the NCAA. They keep getting Condoleezza Rice to come in. They have a new goddamn, a pure board and bred thing and say, they're going to be our judge. We're going to put, I never heard from these people again. They had 3 of these things in the last 5 years. And I'm sure she's a wonderful lady and a good American, all that sort of stuff, right? But nothing happened. I don't know what the hell their answer was. But they saved 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. These kids suffer every time there's a delay.
And that is actually a really good point to transition to the next part of our event tonight. And I just want to say thank you so much for just the spirited, the passion, just all of these things in this talk. I really hope that those student athletes who are watching, that you see that there are people in the legal field, there are people in the public space, there are people in the academic space who love on you, even when you don't know their names or vice versa. So thank you, Sonny. Thank you, Dr. Butler, and thank you, Tim. So now we're going to transition, and we really want to move this forward and close out this great conversation and start thinking about what can we do? What is next? So our next part is going to bring in Michael Hausfeld and also Dr. Hal Singer. We really want to call on them to give us a call to action, really thinking about what is next? What should we do to pay attention? And what should we be paying attention to in the coming months? What are your calls to action, Dr. Singer and Michael Hausfeld? So now I'm going to see if we have Dr. Singer. Are you present with us? Michael Hausfeld.
I'm with you, but I can't start my video. It says the host has stopped it. I'm waiting for the host to start my video.
You know what? Let's go ahead, since we have your voice, let's just go ahead and keep it going while they work on the back end to get your video up. Dr. Singer and Michael Hausfeld. Oh, now we can see you. Tossing the ball to you. What is next? We've had a lot of good discussion tonight. What should everyone watching this and who is listening and paying attention to what this conversation is, what should we be thinking about over the coming months? What are your calls to action for us to move this conversation forward?
Yeah, I think that I want to pick up on something that was mentioned by Sonny, I think, in the last panel, is this Murphy bill that's making its way through Congress right now. Looks pretty good to me. I wanted to tell you, what's in it. But before we get into the bill, I just want to say that, the NCAA, I think, has revealed its hand by now. It's flouting the state laws. It's showing that they're above the law, and the NCAA just is frankly not governable. The Florida deadline has come and gone. It was July 2021 to get a deadline imposed on the NCAA, and they're not moving. And it's pretty clear to me that it's going to take action at the federal level to really move the needle here. And I think Congress is poised to do it. They just have to affirm the college athletes' NIL rights, and they have to, I think, impose severe penalties against the NCAA for interfering in a free market for NIL rights. I just want to, if I can, I just want to highlight 3 of the elements of the Murphy bill that I think are all important, necessary, and smart. But the first is it would permit college athletes to monetize their social media platforms, endorse small businesses, strike sports apparel deals and video game deals. Second, it would give athletes coordination rights. And this is just a fancy word for saying the ability to negotiate collectively with sponsors. You can think about a difficult contracting problem when you're entering into a deal with, say, EA Sports for a video game. It might make sense to allow a collection of athletes to negotiate collectively for their rights in that deal. And then finally, it would preempt state laws to achieve a uniform policy across the land. Of course, as long as that uniformity confers full NIL rights to the athletes. I think Michael now has joined us. I don't want to hog the mic. So Michael, how do you feel about the Murphy bill, or what's your call to action?
We helped the senator in drafting the bill, but I want to go back to something that John said, or the question that he asked, what's the model? I want to be clear as kind of a disclaimer. I don't know much about sports, and as Sonny can attest that I get lots of sports terminology incorrect, but I do know rights. And John, to answer your question, the model is not going to change unless there's an evolution away from the present model. And there is no one with their hands out saying, here, take it. It's got to be taken. There's got to be some action to recognize what the rights are of these young people, in this sport. And let's talk about rights for a moment. Every person's work has a value. And it is that the right of that person to get a fair value for that work. No one has the right to steal that value. And the NCAA has been operating college athletics, particularly big-time college athletics, as the athletes are nothing more than their property to be used and disposed of at the lowest cost. And the lowest price for the use of that value is zero. One of the elements of the value clearly that these athletes bring is the economics of their name, image, and likeness. Every college athlete that enters the sport from the first year that they're there has to sign an agreement with the association which says that in return for the scholarship, the athlete confers the exclusive right to the athlete's name, image, and likeness for any purpose in the discretion of the association throughout the universe and forever. I think that's pretty broad. I think that itself is a recognition that there is value in that name, image, and likeness, which the association is basically taking from the athlete and acquiring it for itself. And so there is no sport that I'm aware of, Hal, played anywhere at the same level of college sports where the athletes and the owners are not in some collective bargaining association, so that there is a balance between the rights of the players and the takings of the owners. That doesn't exist in college sports. And I'm going to get to a much broader perspective than what's been discussed. NIL is just one component of that relationship. There's a relationship with the university. There's a relationship with the association, and there's a relationship with the conference. Right now, the present system fails the athletes in all three respects. They are not getting the academics that they are basically encouraged to participate in return for their performance athletically. They are not being cared for or protected in their safety and health. They are not being clearly compensated on an equitable basis or given an opportunity like other scholarship students, at the schools. And there certainly is no deference or attention being paid to racial equality. That's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the Rights Commission that was basically asked to evaluate the NCAA in each of these areas. And the commission found that in all 4 areas, the association failed. So what is the rights of the athletes with regard to NIL? A particular subset of the economics of college sports, which Ed O'Bannon focused on. And that is when there is any exchange of remuneration for the performance of these athletes, a good part of it is being paid for the connection of that performance with the athlete's name, image, and likeness, who they are, what they've done, and what their reputation is in the market. I disagree with Tim to this extent. I don't separate at the NIL rights of the athlete between broadcast and individual or endorsements. I think they have the right to both. That's where the big money is. What they do with that money, it could be the subject, again, of collective bargaining, where the athletes could decide how they want their share of that portion distributed not only to the athletes in the games, of that sport, but to the athletes across gender, across sports, throughout the entire university system.
So thank you so much both for your participation. We are running out of time, and this conversation can probably go on for days and days and days. And so I want to transition now to our last call of action as we close out. And I hate to cut you both off. We're going to bring in ABIS founder Gary Charles to close us out with what should we do next? What should ABIS be doing, Gary?
You know what? Wow. I got to tell you that those panels were so passionate that it had me thinking about a lot of things. And I feel bad that Hal and Michael got cut off because the other panel went on so long. I have a couple things that I need to say first, because, Dr. Butler got me going a little bit when he said to start another league. And here's what I would say to him, that when Blacks wanted to move into the suburb, the white man said, go do your own thing. So they did. They went to Greenwood, Tulsa, okay, and built Black Wall Street. And what happened? The white man burned it down. They created Rosewood in Florida. What did the white man do? They burned it down. When Abdul-Jabbar was playing, because he was so good, they created a rule to say you couldn't dunk. Why am I saying all of this? What I'm saying to Dr. Butler is that every time we try to do something, they change the rules. Okay, so when you say create another league, they're not gonna let us do that. There's too much money involved. When they turn around and you say they don't have enough money to do it, they just fired so far 25 coaches in the pandemic world, 25. And they're gonna have to pay a buyout and then hire other one. Where's that money coming from? Why is it, as Sonny said, it's only in basketball and football? If you play tennis, you could start making your money at 12 years old. One of the things I don't like, I can't stand it, people insulting my intelligence. We have waited 400 years. We're not waiting anymore. So with ABIS, we want to be the voice for racial equity in sports. That's the reason why we created this organization. We have powerful people on here. So some of the things that we have to do, we have to change the narrative. We have to change it because they have been controlling the narrative since I have known. So people really believe that kids are not supposed to get any money because they control the narrative. I can remember arguing with broadcasters and other media people about that. Sunday nights to get into big arguments with them. Now the same people are saying these kids should get paid. It's amazing. Why is it always has to be 10 years for people to do the right thing when it comes to Blacks? We're not allowing that anymore. So what ABIS is planning to do is this, is to get together with Michael Hausfeld like we've been doing, because we created an NIL subcommittee, put a plan together, get with Senator Cory Booker, get with Senator Blumenthal, tell them our plans, get in front of Congress. Why is it everyone else is getting in front of them but us? We need to have a seat at the table. And I want to make it clear, when I say we, I mean men and women. Women have been screwed for far too long. They need to be part of this because maybe they might bring some damn sense into all of us. So I don't want to hear there's not enough money. Because let me say this to y'all. When I first started, I was a good coach. But when Lamar Odom and Speedy Claxton walked in my gym, I became a hell of a coach. The players drive this business. So you're telling me it's okay for a coach to make $7 million. So you want to know where the money is? cut down on some of that damn money you're paying these coaches. What did Archie Miller just get? $10 million buyout from Indiana? But you have no money. What could you do for kids? How is that right that you could keep my name? I worked on Wall Street for 20 years. They had me for the time I was there, but they never owned my name. They never owned my images. How are they allowed to own these kids? Here's the other call to action. Just as Terrell said, we have to educate, educate, educate. We have to explain to the parents what's going on. The parents have to stop being scared that when we tell you you have rights and they're concerned about the kid could lose their eligibility. And this whole idea about you're a student athlete, another myth that they created. They've done a hell of a job. Let me explain something to you all. If you're a top player, you go to school for a semester, you stay eligible for the second semester, but you don't go to classes because you know you're leaving. So how does that make you a student athlete? So even the kid said, I'm not a student athlete, I'm a college athlete. We understand these things, and it's time for us to put this out. We need to use social media to get the word out. We have to stay strong. Because you know what? Like I tell people all the time, if I'm right, you're not stopping me. You're not doing anything wrong if you're doing the right thing. This is a situation in which the time has come for all of us to get together. They have spent a lot of time putting the blacks apart. We as the people need to understand that and come together. And we need allies. That's why I'm glad I see Tim on here, the Dr. Starowski and the Michael Hausfeld, because the allies help us move. Any movement you have seen of all the years, the whites are right there with us. So we have to keep pushing that, put the pressure on the NCAA. That's what we have to do, because it is the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I think this passion and this excitement, there are so many ways that we can educate and partner and build up and encourage and also just challenge and fight and recreate new ways for Blacks in sports and other student athletes to be able to really benefit from the fullness of their skill and their talent. So it's not being given away. We cut off, we cut off Hal and Michael really early on. And I wanted to just toss it back to Hal really quickly. And Michael, if you wanted to add, just really quickly wrap up. Could you maybe give us one more piece of action that we can think about as we end this conversation and transition out?
Sure. Quickly, I want to keep a close eye on what the Supreme Court does in this case involving the NCAA, and it could go sideways. And by sideways, I mean really bad for the athletes. It's very possible the Supreme Court is going to make the harms to the athletes subservient to the supposed benefits of consumers who have a taste for so-called amateurism. So watch that carefully. If it goes the wrong way, I think we're going to have to call on Congress to nullify not only that decision, but also a similar decision called American Express.
And I just follow up with what Hal said. I think either way the Supreme Court goes, the athletes could win. The reason, if the athletes lose, then they have no choice but to go to Congress or somewhere else to actually aggravate the situation to the point where they get the legislation that they need, not only to cover NIL, but to cover academics, to cover safety, health, and racial equality. If they win, it's still a good time to go to Congress because the NCAA will, seeking a congressional immunity from the antitrust laws. And that's the time, again, to get Congress to look at the entire situation and say, we're going to balance this sport just like all other sports and give the players the rights they need across the board, from NIL to academics, to safety, to health, and to racial equality.
And on that note, I want to thank you all for your participation and support of our panel event tonight focused on name, image, and likeness. Again, I just want to reemphasize the mission of ABIS is to connect and inspire people to boldly advocate and for racial, social, and economic justice for Blacks in sports. We have some more events coming up next. And we look forward to your participation and support of those events. But I want to thank everyone who served as a panelist tonight. Thank you, Gary, for your vision for ABIS. And thank you all for the ways in which you are supporting student athletes, not only as advocates and allies, but also for serving as co-conspirators and changing everything that we can do in the future to make the sport better.
Thank you.